All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're tackling one of the most talked about and, let's be honest, controversial theories in geopolitics, Samuel Huntington's The Clash of Civilizations. This is an idea that totally changed the game for how we look at the world after the Cold War. Huntington kicks things off with this quote. Whoa, it's pretty intense, right? But it gets right to the heart of his argument, that our identity, who we are, is often shaped by who we are not. It's a really stark way to start thinking about global politics. I mean, you have to remember the vibe back in the early 90s. The Berlin Wall comes down, the Soviet Union collapses, and there's this huge wave of optimism. People genuinely thought we'd hit the end of history, that liberal democracy had won, and a new era of peace was starting. Yeah, that didn't last long. Instead of peace and harmony, the world just seemed to explode with new, vicious conflicts. Huntington points out something pretty chilling. The word genocide was actually used more in the first 5 years after the Cold War than during any 5-year stretch of it. So much for harmony. And that created a massive problem. The old map, capitalism versus communism, America versus the Soviets, it was suddenly totally useless. We needed a new way to understand what was going on. What were the new dividing lines? Who were the new friends and foes? Well, Huntington's answer was pretty clear. Ideology was out, and something much, much older was back in a big way: cultural identity. He talks about this protest in Los Angeles in 1994, where the crowd was a sea of Mexican flags. For him, that was a light bulb moment. It showed that symbols of who you are, your flag, your religion, your culture, were becoming the things people would rally around. And this is where he drops his big idea. He says, okay, we need a new map to make sense of all this chaos. But this map isn't based on countries or political ideas, it's based on civilizations. Now, a paradigm, that's just a fancy word for a framework or a lens to see the world through. Huntington wasn't just saying, here's what's happening. He was offering a tool to help us sort through the noise, to see the patterns, and to figure out what really matters. And the main thing on this new map? The civilization. Now, this isn't about race, and it's not about what passport you carry. For Huntington, a civilization is the biggest we you can feel a part of. It's that deep sense of shared history, language, values, and, this is key, religion. So who are the big players on this new world stage? Well, Huntington lays them out. You've got the Western civilization, the Islamic world, the Confucian or Cynic civilization centered on China, and others like the Hindu and Slavic Orthodox worlds. These, he argued, are the new power blocks that we need to be watching. Okay, so if these civilizations are like the new tectonic plates of the world, the big question is, where are the earthquakes going to happen? Huntington's answer is simple and direct. They'll happen along the fault lines, where these different civilizations grind up against each other. And the war in Yugoslavia was the perfect, tragic example of this. Think about it. That country didn't just split apart randomly. It cracked right along the ancient historical lines separating 3 distinct civilizations: the Catholic West in Croatia, the Orthodox world in Serbia, and the Islamic world in Bosnia. It fit his map perfectly. He even breaks it down further. He talks about cleft countries, places like Sudan or Nigeria, that are literally split in half by one of these fault lines. And then you've got torn countries, like Turkey or Russia, where the leaders are trying to drag their nation into a different civilization, causing this massive identity crisis from within. But on a global scale, Huntington argued the main event, the biggest fault line of all, wasn't just between any 2 civilizations. It was between the West and pretty much everyone else. He called this the central axis of world politics, the West pushing its values versus other civilizations pushing back. And this quote just hits the nail on the head. The West promotes ideas like democracy, human rights, and free markets as universal truths for everybody. But for a lot of the rest of the world, that doesn't feel universal at all. It feels Western. It feels like imperialism with a friendlier face. Now, to really understand this dynamic, you've got to look at this shifting power balance. Let's talk territory. At its absolute peak in the 1920s, the West controlled almost half of the entire planet, an incredible 49%. But fast forward to the 2020s, Huntington projected that number would be cut in half, down to just 24%. That's a massive shift in who controls the map. And it's the same story with money. At its height, the West was the world's economic engine, producing a staggering 70% of the world's total economic product. But again, he projected that would crater to around 30% by the 2020s. See, this isn't just a minor adjustment. This is the end of centuries of Western dominance. It's the rise of a truly multipolar, multi-civilizational world. He also points to another huge factor: demographics. He saw what he called a massive youth bulge in many Muslim countries. Huge populations of young people all coming of age at the same time. And historically, when you have that many restless young people, you get instability, protests, and even revolutions. He argued this was a key engine driving the Islamic resurgence. So if this is the new explosive map of the world, how do we keep it from blowing up? How do you avoid a global war between civilizations? It's important to remember, Huntington wasn't cheering for this conflict. He was trying to give us a warning to prevent it. And he proposed a few ground rules for this new era. And here they are, his two big rules of the road. First, the abstention rule. Basically, mind your own business. The major powers, the core states, need to stop meddling in the internal affairs of other civilizations. And second, the joint mediation rule. When conflicts do break out between civilizations, the big powers from each side have to work together to put out the fire. It's all about respect and cooperation. So when you boil it all down, everything comes back to this one central theme. Ideology? That was the 20th century. In the world we live in now, the organizing principle isn't what you believe, it's who you are. Culture and identity are everything. And this, from Huntington himself, is the money quote. This is the single biggest takeaway. The Cold War was all about picking a team, capitalism or communism. But now, our alliances and our conflicts are shaped by a question that's way more personal, way more fundamental. And that's really the thought to leave you with. Whether you think Huntington was a prophet or you think he was completely wrong, his theory forces us all to ask that question. In this messy, complicated world, the old maps don't work anymore. The new map is all about identity.